I took the SAT test for the first time about 10 years ago, and for the past year or two I've wondered what it would be like to take the test again, just for kicks. I was never very happy with my mediocre scores, and thought if I could take the test again I could do much better, and obtain some revenge on this test for making me look bad. Also, since I've always said that having fun is too much work, I figured taking the test was a great way to avoid having any sort of fun for a few hours. Well, I finally got to the point where I decided to make this test-taking dream a reality, but I couldn't decide if I wanted to wear my regular attire, my boom-body shirt, or my Elvis suit for the big day. In the end, I wore my regular attire, figuring I wouldn't stand out so much. At 27 years of age, I was still a young guy, and blended in well with the high school kids I took the test with. I guess that's why I was able to sneak in and take the test without a problem. I was ready for this test. I knew I didn't have to study to show these high school kids how it's done. I figured not studying would be a fair handicap, since I was a former high school teacher and had a bachelor's degree in mathematics. If I studied, it just wouldn't be fair. Plus, not studying would make my revenge all the sweeter. True, in a way I renounced my formal education by dropping out after I graduated and hanging my license to cremate people over my teaching certificate. But even so, studying for the SAT after I finished college would have been overkill. Yet I still took my abstinence world championship belt along with me for confidence. I had to be there at 8 a.m. on a Saturday, and I had to pay $45 to get in. I've made worse investments though, like the time I spent $21 on a self-published book, and it spelled 5 words incorrectly on a single page. Little did I know my imaginary friend Boomo the Bean would be accompanying me to the test. When he's around, I tend to see unusual stuff everywhere I go. As I drove to the High School of Embraceable Nightmares where the test was held, Boomo pointed out a guy wearing a large radio as a cape. Every eyebrow on this guy was as large as a pair of pants, and even took on the shape of a pair of pants. This guy was obviously a crossing guard, and Boomo said he first met the crossing guard when it was cool to use stop signs as underarm deodorant. After running us over, the crossing guard yelled at us for driving on the road instead of crossing it. I told him we were only trying to get to school for a test. The crossing guard pointed to a mark on the ground that looked like a pair of hands. When asked to put my hands on this mark, my fingernails grew into some sort of wall containing a door. I went through the door in my fingernails after waiting for Boomo to finish playing hula hoop with a ring of ears that came out of my abstinence belt. Then, to my surprise, I discovered the door was actually an entrance to the school itself. I got into a line, and everyone in the line was assigned to a room with a test proctor. The proctor in my room was a great stone monolith, but it was also a nice rainbow. Before the test even started, the room I was in broke, so I had to fix it. Boomo was no help, because all he did was use one of his teeth as a pogo stick. I was given a Mobius strip of paper to take the test on, and the monolith proctor gave us our instructions using psychic powers. I expected the test to consist of a reading section and a math section of equal length, but as I took the test, I saw something like 7 reading sections, an essay, and 3 math sections, with no analogies whatsoever. I didn't remember the SAT being like that the last time I took it. I thought the SAT was famous for its analogies section. The test felt easy, but I had to move way too fast. It really was a test of speed more than anything else. I guess it's really not so bad for measuring collegiate potential, because stuff is thrown at you fast in college. As easy as the math questions were, I couldn't answer them all. Pretty sad for someone with a math degree, I admit, but that darn time limit was simply unreasonable. During the testing breaks, I thought about how some of the stories in the reading section could have been more exciting. I would have enjoyed a story about a strange land where people spoke with their eyelids instead of their mouths and recognized each other by the way their hands looked instead of their faces. I'm not saying the essays on the test weren't well written. They just weren't terribly exciting. In fact, the most interesting print I noticed that day appeared in the form of a little side note from an English textbook under my desk. It mentioned a British writer who took on the Japanese name of Saki, just for the heck of it, I guess. Maybe I'll read him sometime. Besides the speedy time limit, my only other test-taking trouble involved writing a statement. Test takers were required to read a certain sentence and copy it onto a designated space on the answer sheet. Writing the statement in print was not allowed. So I had to write it in cursive, and man, it's been so long since I've used cursive, I actually forgot how. Took me a while to figure it out again. Just the first capital I was enough to throw me off. Although I didn't hallucinate during the actual test questions, while writing the cursive statement I saw that I had 2 right hands. I always figured that if I were actually born with 2 right hands, I wouldn't have one removed to look more normal. Instead, I'd add a 3rd right hand to look more interesting. I was very surprised to see a fellow from the future pay a visit during one of the final testing breaks. He was quite friendly, and half of his body was made out of cell phones. He informed us that most things in the future are made out of cell phones, even chewing gum. In fact, to his recollection, the only thing in the future that isn't made out of cell phones is a large snake with several rhinos for a head. Anyway, the fellow only spoke to us for about 5 minutes, because we had to get back to testing, and he had to get back to the year 1804. I can only imagine how advanced things will be when we finally reach that year. When the test was over, I didn't really talk to anybody or hang around or anything. I just left and returned to some personal business at hand. Despite my annoyance with the time limits, I was glad we were able to get out of the school at a decent hour. I had to go to a wedding and a funeral later on that day. The wedding was for a friend of mine. I don't know who the funeral was for. Old Boomo just likes to attend random funerals during his leisure time. He never wants to go to the movies or bars or anything like that, and he always wants to drag me along to these funerals for strangers. He makes it a point to complain to the ushers about the low quality of the flowers with the casket. "Cheap roses again?" he says. "Where's the poison ivy? Where are the Venus flytraps?" Several weeks later, I got my scores back, and I must say they were disappointing, especially for a college graduate. I'm glad Boomo wasn't there to laugh at me at the time. I got a 650 out of 800 for reading, a 640 out of 800 for math, and a 620 out of 800 for writing. Yes, someone with a math degree got a lower score in math than reading. What kind of test revenge is that? It's almost the same math and reading scores I had from 10 years earlier. Of course, there was no writing section back then. I guess I can forget about Harvard paying for all of my graduate school expenses now. Well, at least I learned that the best way to stifle brilliance is to expect it, or at least that's the excuse I'm using. That's pretty much the whole story. I'm not proud of it, but it's what happened. Boomo makes fun of me every day since he found out about my low test scores, and I can't even go through my daily routine of feeding electrical outlet covers into the shredder without being hassled. Oh well, at least I still have all my abstinence trophies. They're better than good SAT scores any day.